Shipyard Brewery is a proud sponsor of Scuba Nation. Born in Maine, brewed in Florida. Scuba Nation, want to dive with the largest shark in the ocean? We're in Mexico to dive with the world's largest fish, the whale shark. You could get close up and personal with these amazing animals in the water for a mind-bending experience. We're going to find out more about these gentle giants next on Scuba Nation.
Who is Scuba Nation? Billy C., Boston born and raised.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
Bitch and Mitch, Southern boy. And every other diver on the planet. So join us as we travel the globe exploring Mother Ocean. Welcome to Scuba Nation. One nation underwater. Presented by Leisure Pro. Visit leisurepro.com for all your diving and snorkeling needs.
Whale sharks. They're the largest fish in the ocean. Benign but amazing to watch both above and below the water. But they're still mysterious in many ways. A lot of what we know is only decades old. The world's largest aggregation of these beautiful creatures can be found in Mexico off the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula. We can't wait to show you the fun you can have while diving with these guys, while learning more about these massive fish. To understand the whale shark, you only need to talk to one person, Dr. Bob Huter at the Mote Marine Laboratory in Sarasota, Florida. He sat down with us to give us his insight on these gentle giants.
So back in the mid-1990s, we'd been working in Mexico, an area of the Yucatan Peninsula, on a completely different species of shark, the blacktip shark. And one day, one of the fishermen mentioned casually to us that, by the way, guys, you do know that every year after you leave, we have all these whale sharks here on the other side of the island. And I said, what? And had him repeat it to me in Spanish, and then we talked through it. And it turned out that the fishermen knew about these whale sharks. They've known about them for generations, but nobody had ever studied them. Scientists weren't aware of them. So we began studies in 2003, and lo and behold, discovered that this is the world's largest aggregation of whale sharks anywhere on the planet.
I was wicked jacked up because I was gonna go see a whale shark for the first time. These fish are 45 feet long. It's the biggest fish in the ocean. Headed to Mexico to see these fish for my first time, it's a spiritual experience for Billy C.
Well, we now know they go there because they're there to feed. That's what it's all about. It's a summer feeding ground. There's actually a very productive area there of what we call upwelling of currents that come up from the deep ocean out in the Yucatan Channel that brings cool, nutrient-rich water that then fuels the growth of plankton, and plankton is what the whale sharks are all about. They're also there for fish eggs. There are a number of fish species that spawn there in that area, and the whale sharks love those eggs. They love to sort of aggregate around the egg spawn and just gobble up the little eggs. So it's all about food in the summertime.
If you're lucky, you might see one, maybe two of these whale sharks in the wild while diving or fishing off the coast of Florida or other places. But in Mexico, it gets a little crazy. You are guaranteed to see a couple of these sharks. Yeah, just a couple.
Off of Isla Mujeres, we think as many as 1,500 whale sharks may come through that area each summer. At any one point, you can see more than 100 animals in one spot. In this one aggregated dense area that's called the afuera area, the outside area in blue water, is really where it's really spectacular, where you can swim with 60, 75 or more whale sharks at a time. Well, whale sharks are are what we call ram feeders. They swim along with their mouths open, and they're constantly filtering then the food that's in the water. But they can also do something called suction feeding, where they stop and they kind of hang vertically if they're around sort of a nice collection of food, and they'll just suck that water in and filter it out and eat that way. So two different kinds of feeding, and we've documented both of them. The good news is we think that in the Atlantic group, these sharks, are, for example, in Mexico, that the population is definitely healthy, stable, maybe even growing in numbers. We have to look out for threats to them. Everything from too much ecotourism to certain aspects of ocean pollution. Them being filter feeders, they're very sensitive to things like plastic in the water and oil spills. They also are really threatened by shipping. Some of the shipping lanes are very close to the feeding ground down there in Isla Mujeres, and we're trying to get the shipping industry to try to understand this and maybe move their lanes a little bit farther out. But I think in the Atlantic they're in pretty good shape, and we should have whale sharks for many generations if we're smart.
Stay with us, more of the gentle giants, right after this. Thanks for staying with us. We're checking out the largest fish in the ocean, the whale shark. Our knowledge of whale sharks is only a couple decades old. Dr. Huter, a top scientist studying the whale shark, is pretty passionate about these animals, and he shares how his interest got started.
Actually, I saw my first whale shark when I was a graduate student at the University of Miami. We got a call that there was a whale shark that was up in the shallows and it was in trouble. A fellow student and I went down, and sure enough, here was this whale shark that was in maybe 10 feet of water, and that animal she was big and she looked fine externally, but she was clearly in some kind of distress, whether she was sick or had been hit, although she didn't have any signs of it, we don't know. And unfortunately, she died several days later. You know, I was so impressed with her. I got on and held on to her fin, and then she would rise up and move a couple hundred yards, and just holding on to this animal, just the incredible power that was there in those muscles was really impressive. But I wanted to work on whale sharks. I wanted to do research on them. So when this discovery was made about the aggregation in Mexico, we said, this is where we're going to do it. And it was like a living laboratory. This is where we really learned a tremendous amount about the biology of these animals.
You know, scientists know a lot about whale sharks, but there's a lot they don't know. And one of those things is, where do these sharks go after their stay in Mexico?
Most of the knowledge about whale sharks has really been revealed in the last 20 years, but we knew almost nothing about their real biology, and certainly very little about their migrations, and now we know quite a bit. Using satellite tags like this, we have tracked then the movements of these sharks over periods of almost up to a year. And you can see that all the sharks in this study start down here in the area off Mexico. This is where the tracks begin. And then you see this incredible fanning out of the animals after they leave the feeding site in the summertime and go throughout most of the Gulf of Mexico. They go into the Gulf Stream area between Cuba and Florida. Some of them head down off of Central America and Belize. and a few go through here. Our most dramatic movement has been a female whale shark that we thought was pregnant when we tagged her because she was rather rotund and she was large enough in size. And she went from here all the way down through the Caribbean, down past the equator off the coast of Brazil, about halfway between Brazil and Africa. From August of 2007 to January of 2008, she traveled almost 5,000 miles in the 5 months. Named her Rio Lady because she came off of Brazil, and her tag came off at that point in this area in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. So why was she here? What is the purpose of her migration there? We think that she went down there to give birth to her pups. The female whale sharks that are carrying as many as 300 pups inside of them will go out to the open ocean, away from land, away from the continental shelf. Why? Because it gets them away from predators. That appears to be the way that they've been successful as a species for tens of millions of years. Of course, the holy grail is to figure out where they mate. We have some new devices called accelerometers that we could put on these animals and look at their very fine-scale movements. So we hope someday to be able to deploy those on a pair of whale sharks that may be, doing a little foreplay, if we could figure that out, and catch them in the act, and then understand where those areas are, where they need to be protected, because obviously mating is a critical part of their life history. Other than that, I think that our main focus right now is translating the science that we have done on them into policy to conserve them, protect them, not because they are so special that none should ever be killed, but because they're worth so much more to us as living animals, and nowhere is that more true than in Mexico, where we've seen a movement of overfishing of a community of people where the economy was based on fishing and it was too much fishing, to now this non-consumptive use of the resource, taking people out to see whale sharks.
Stay with us, more whale sharks straight ahead. Thanks for staying with us. We're checking out the largest fish in the ocean, the whale shark. So knowing how far whale sharks have to travel to get to Mexico is incredible. The satellite tags are one way to track the individual animals, but scientists also have another way to identify these sharks. They're recording their fingerprints.
The best way now, the one that's used around the world, is something called photo identification, where you take a picture of the left side of the whale shark, right behind the head, sort of right behind the gill slits. The spots that whale sharks have, which makes them, of course, so recognizable and cute, as well as unique. Those spots are a unique pattern for each individual, kind of like a fingerprint. And by taking a picture of that and then putting it on a website that has a worldwide database called whaleshark.org, we're able to match up individual sharks, from that are seen in different places, and then understand their movement patterns. So yes, we're slowly contributing to a worldwide catalog of the number of whale sharks. We don't know how many whale sharks there are in the world. There are some guesses, but they're really just, that's what they are. They're modeling guesses. It could be tens of thousands, it could be more than 100,000, or it could be a lot less. We're not sure.
This part of Mexico has seen a brisk tourist industry just for people who want to come and dive with these whale sharks. The season to do this is in August, and there are a ton of charters to take people out.
Whale sharks are the biggest fish in the ocean. They're gentle giants, so our experiences in the water with them was magical.
I've been a proponent of ecotourism with whale sharks because I think that it's a great way for people to not only see these animals and experience the thrill of being in the environment with the largest animal that you can really be that close to and be safe. So it's a great experience. It's a wonderful snorkeling experience.
Oh my God, it was crazy.
The problem is, of course, that we as a species, whenever we find something good, we seem to overdo it. And so now we have a situation where there's an awful lot of boats there. And my fear is, going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg for the economy of Quintana Roo, Mexico. That it's going to affect the behavior, and maybe already is affecting the behavior of these animals that need to be there feeding in the summertime. So we are trying to work with Mexican colleagues, government, and scientists to develop sort of a rational approach and understand what the really maximum number of boats should be to see the sharks at any one time.
The charters like to leave early and make a half a day of it, coming back around 1 p.m. But many don't know that the whale sharks actually come back in the late afternoon as well.
Eggs and the plankton that the whale sharks eat are all at the surface. So the whale sharks feed at the surface. So that makes unbelievable snorkeling opportunities to get next to the biggest fish in the ocean.
Right at sunrise, they come right to the surface and they start feeding on that surface layer of fish eggs and plankton. And then as the winds come up later in the morning and the sun gets higher, they do drop down. And that's when all the tourist boats leave. But you know what happens is after about 1 or 2 o'clock, they start coming back up again. And that's a good time to study them in the afternoon.
And dive with them. The tourism generated by diving with the whale sharks has transformed and helped the locals and the Mexican economies to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. That means not only employment for the local Mexican people, but fantastic places to stay to make an incredible dive vacation here.
Again, though, the challenge is, because it's a lucrative industry, is to keep a cap on it so we don't overdo it. So this is what we'd like to try to use our science to help them do, is to come up with a rational plan for the future of ecotourism there.
Science is just getting started to assist the whale sharks. Seeing them up close is a feather you have to get for your diving cap. To be able to dive with these gentle giants and feel safe, amazed, and enamored all at the same time is a sensation that you will not soon forget. For Billy C., I'm Mitch, One Nation Underwater. Thanks for watching.